issue. Here you go. Here you go, Anthony. Given the fact that many Old Testament verses discuss angels being sons of God, Genesis 6, Job 1, and always being close to God, shouldn't we conclude that God is talking talking to the angels? Now, I can think of some glaring problems so he's talking about let us create man in our image, that this would be talking to angels. So, I mean, the glaring difficulty I would see here is that man would thus be created in the image of God and of angels. And so
and
we're
by the angels.
Yeah, and by the angels. So God is talking to angels. So God and the angels are co-creators of man, creating man, not just in the image of God, but in the image of God and of angels. So that would be some interesting theology. But what are your thoughts?
So think about this. So several things. And we worked through a lot, I think just drives this. But now bringing some of this up in connection with this question. The Old Testament doesn't leave us casting about to explain who the us and the our are. It speaks of God making man and in the divine image. And so the subjects that are being addressed here are involved in this, and the image in which man is made is a common image to the persons being addressed. Throughout the Old Testament, there's explicit mention of more than one person who is involved in the creation of man, and it's not the angels. You have God's Spirit and you have God's wisdom. Right? God's Spirit is explicitly mentioned in Genesis 1, and I've shown that intertextually, God's wisdom is also present in Genesis 1. Proverbs 8 very clearly echoes Genesis 1 and tells us that God's wisdom was the master craftsman who was there with him. It even uses the same phrase in the beginning, right? So Proverbs 8 says that he is the beginning of God's way, and he says that he was there from the beginning, right? It's clearly echoing Genesis, and this is why the Jews in the Targum said, in the beginning with wisdom, God created heaven and earth. I don't remember if I quoted the first verse in the Targums. So from the Old Testament, even the immediate context, you already know who the subjects are that God is addressing. And it's not angels. And angels, moreover, who aren't even mentioned there, when you look at, elsewhere, it never implicates them in divine activity like this. They're never said to have actually done anything at creation. And they aren't even said to have been made in the divine image. Now, think about it, because I know people assume that, I remember before I became a Christian, I used to think, as a lot of people do, that when somebody dies, they become an angel, right? That's the goal of existence or something.
It's not true, Anthony.
It's not. But think about it. There's something fundamentally different about man that, that distinguishes him from the angels, and it's that he was made in God's image. Mankind is more special to God than the angels. This is why in Psalm 8, the psalmist says, "What is man that you're mindful of him? The son of man that you care for him. You created him a little lower than the angels. To be sure, he's lower in the sense that the angels dwell in heaven and for a time occupy a more exalted position. But it goes on to say that man is destined to be exalted above the angels, to be crowned with glory and honor. That's why the New Testament says it's not to angels that God has destined the world to come to be subjected, but to man. And it says that man are going to judge angels. Well, one of the fundamental distinguishing things about the human race is that we are a race, right? The angels are not a race. You don't have dad angel and mom angel and baby angel, right? They're not offspring. They're not corporately related to each other like that. They're discrete creations. The human race is a corporate entity. We are united, related to one another through a common, parentage. So we are social beings, and we exist as a race. That's why the phrase for Adam, the first man, is also the name for the race. The same word in Hebrew for man, or for Adam, and for mankind is the one word Adam. And so that's a fundamental distinguishing thing about men. Hebrews 2 says that it's not angels that Jesus helps, but the human race. He took our nature. And it's because we are there's a fundamental unity in the race that Christ's death could be beneficial for not just one person. If Jesus took on an angelic nature, how would that benefit angels in general? How could they benefit from that when there's not this corporate solidarity. They're not a race, like I said. But he can take our nature, and by dying in our nature, atone for the sin of men, right? Not just one man, but all who come to him in faith. So man is made uniquely in the image of God. But now think about this. I don't know if Yossi is asking this as a Christian, or I don't know where Yossi's coming from. But number one, I've already said this is not how the Old Testament teaches this. But think about the New Testament. In the New Testament, it talks about man being saved, which includes not only being delivered from guilt and judgment. That's what Christ's blood does. He atones for our sin. But we're also told that he's delivering us from our corruption. We've despoiled the image. And what does that involve then when God restores us to the perfection of the divine image? Think about how the New Testament describes this. It speaks of us being conformed to the image of the Son. Why does it say that? Why does it? It's assuming that the Son's image is that image that we need to be restored to. And who is involved in doing this? 2 Corinthians 3 says that we are being transformed into that image by the Spirit. So the Spirit is the active agent transforming us into the divine image. All this is of a piece with Genesis 1 and understood in its Old Testament context as the activity of three persons. Father, Son, and Spirit made man in their image, their common image. And the New Testament says we're being restored to that image by the Son and by the Spirit. So Old and New Testament agree here.